Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another podcast of Between the Vines. This podcast is a collaboration between Penn State University and Cornell University, and it's coming to you from the Lake Erie Regional Grape Program. My special co-host, welcome back, is Dr. Terry Bates, the director of the Cornell Lake Erie Research and Extension Laboratory. Thanks, Terry.
Good to be here. We already established off screen that I'm punchy, so who knows what's going to come out of my mouth today.
Oh, it'd be fun. It's also Cinco de Mayo here today.
It's Cinco de Mayo. It's Friday. It's been a long week, so who knows?
I should just tell the listeners, if they haven't been following these on a weekly basis, that Dr. Terry Bates has done decades of research in vine nutrition and our Concord industry, and we always give recommendations based off of that research, but we want to go back and actually tell you how we got there and what he did and why he didn't and what he found out and then how he built upon that.
What I should have done.
But before we get there, one of the incredible projects that have come out of this office, and Dr. Terry Bates was the lead on this SCRI project, which is, do you want to say what an SCRI project is? You want to talk, it's yours. I don't want to say.
Oh, no. Most people have heard me talk about this before. So it's a USDA project. So USDA has a funding program called the Specialty Crop Research Initiative, and it's the program that fits us best as viticulturists. And so we had one that was called it was really about I can't remember the whole title anymore, but it was about using spatial data to measure soil, canopy, and crop characteristics in vineyards. And it became known as the Efficient Vineyard Project, which now has rolled into new projects with the Efficient Vineyard theme.
And we have this amazing tool that came out of it. So the MyEV tool. I don't think that I should move forward until we actually acknowledge all the people who were on it, or at least all of the collaborators, not necessary people. So we had UC Davis on the original one, and then the follow-up one, Nick Gunner of Orbitist. We had Carnegie Mellon, Montpellier. Who am I missing? I think I missed one.
So there was, yes. Sorry, I'm trying to remember all the people that were on it too. It was a very large project. So yes, we had collaborators from Carnegie Mellon University, James Taylor, who's now in Montpellier, France. UC Davis was on it. We had a lot of industry cooperators from like Gallo and the Table Grape Commission, Jay Lohr. It was supported by Donnell Brown, if you're listening out there.
Donnell!
I want to mention the National Grape and Wine Initiative, NGRA, who supported that project and continues to support us in all the current projects that we have going on. So it's very helpful to have that industry and university cooperative link. It's really important because, what we do here is to help support things going on in the industry. And vice versa.
I agree. And it's shared all over the place, especially this tool. And this is probably putting you on the spot, but it's leading up to a program that we're having. How many, you don't have to give me a number, but it's all over the world. People are using this tool all over the world, and we're still actually in the beta process of it. We want people to break it so that we can make it better and more easily adoptable. So do you know how many?
Yeah. Oh, I don't know what the user number is up to right now, but it does. There are people who have created accounts all over the world, and more importantly, in most of the major grape production regions around the world. Not only do we have somebody who has signed up for an account, but they have different data layers, so they're actually using it. And really, okay, so what the MyEV software project is all about is just trying to lower the barriers of adoption for growers to work with spatial data on their farm. So we do all this research to say, use sensors in vineyards and make the most sense out of the data, and then do variable rate management. And it's going to either improve your productivity or your fruit quality or reduce production cost. There's some financial benefit at the end. And there's this big hurdle in the middle about how do we really work with spatial data? Like how, as grower
Yeah.
who has 50 acres in Western New York, how do I work with that spatial data? How do I actually make sense out of the data, get information out of it, and use it? And so I said, yep, that is a big hurdle. There are commercial software packages out there that do that, and I think in my mind, it's always been MyEV is a simple web-based tool to get you started, and then when you want to graduate up and really invest in some of the precision ag tools and software that's out there, then go for it. Yeah, I mean, but if you say, oh, I don't know if I want to spend the money on this, it's like, well, there's nothing better than free.
Right.
So it's a software tool. You can build your farm. So we're gonna have a workshop on this next week. I think this is what you're getting at. Is next
Yes.
Thursday,
May 11th from 9 to 12 at the Cornell Lake Erie Research and Extension Laboratory in Portland, New York.
We had a workshop at the Business Enology and Viticulture program this past winter, Bev, New York, and that went over really well. And we want to do it for locally here in Western New York. So we're going to do that next. So I redid the homepage for the Efficient Vineyard. So if you go to efficientvineyard.com, it talks about the Efficient Vineyard project and the MyEV tool. And I restructured the homepage to kind of, walk you through, like, what can you do with, what is it? What can you do with it? So it has links. So anywhere that there's a link on this page, it kind of brings you to the instructions on how to get started, how to build your farm and log in, and how to draw blocks, put information in on those blocks, and then share with your team and view anywhere. So this software is cloned onto your smartphone. So you work on it on your desktop, and there's some things that work better on the desktop, like creating blocks and clicking around. And then when you want to go to the field and say collect some scouting data, that's optimized for your phone, but the two mirror each other. And so probably in the workshop, this is about as far as we'll get, right? How to log in, build your farm, invite your collaborators, how to use it on your phone, and how to create a data collector. So one of the things we have is literally the icon is a clipboard, and it's really meant to do very much the same thing. I'm going out to my field and I want to scout for anything, broken posts, insect damage, nutrient deficiency, and I don't have a sensor. I just want to collect spatial data on that on my farm. And we wanted to do it before we got into the spray season, because growers will be driving through their vineyards, and they could actually create a data collector. My advice would be to get a mount for your cell phone in your tractor, and so that you're not dropping your cell phone while you're trying to drive down the row. Mount something like on the front windshield of your tractor as you're spraying, and if you're mapping something like, I don't know, broken posts or gopher holes, something you want to fix in the vineyard, then you can just hit that as you go. Then if you really want to get into it, there's a whole section on spatial data, and everyone knows I'm really big on both the research and the processing and the validation of spatial data. So it will also walks you through the process of importing data, processing it, validating that data, and using it for prescription mapping. We probably won't get to any of that in the workshop. We really just want people to start, what are the basics? Yeah, what are the basics? Start using it. As Jen said, break it. If there's something, and I said this in one of the workshops, if you're trying to do a function in MyEV and you're like, that's stupid. Why is that there? Why there should be a button for that, X, Y, and Z. Give us feedback. There's a little bullhorn on the MyEV page, and say, yep, that's stupid. There should be a button here that says save or whatever.
And our feelings won't get hurt either. We want to know these things.
Right. And so, break it, or tell us, give us feedback on how you want to see it made better, and we'll get at it.
And I have to say, sorry, Terry, go ahead.
Oh, we want it to be a tool for growers, built by growers.
And it's so powerful. When I have some growers, because we do have another grant that we're working on to get grower adoption on small and medium-sized farms. So we're working with some collaborating growers, and as they're going through and learning it, they're like, holy cow, this could really help me here, or this could really help there. So I don't want you to be afraid of it. I want you to come to this workshop. We're very approachable. We're going to go slow. And I don't want anybody to be nervous that they're not technologically savvy, because bring your laptop, bring your cell phone. We're going to start inside, do some instruction on how to set up your farm, and then we're going to take you outside with your cell phone and have you collect data. So when you leave, you're confident enough that you'll be able to use some of it on your own farm. So, all right, that's our plug. Are you going to show some stuff here?
You had asked the question about like who's using it around the world.
Right.
So this is a map that Nick Gunner, who's a software developer on this, he came up with. So all the different accounts that people are using around the world. So if you just look at the United States, this is where all the accounts are, and where the dots are bigger, where you actually have farms with multiple data layers. So I can see like who's using it and at what like intensity level that they're using it. So some of our like heavier users are like in Napa, California, or just whatever south of San Francisco.
Yeah, that proves to the power.
Yeah, and then yes, and around the world. So like you go to parts of Europe. Of course, we have collaborators in Montpellier, so there's some usage down there. But then even like in Australia and New Zealand, some people are using it, which is really cool because, I mean, if you're a Western New York grower, we're actually trying to build it for the people here locally, but it's getting a wider reach. And again, I mean, some of our heaviest users are also the people that give us the most feedback. They're like, "Oh, I want to see it to do this," or "I hate when it does that," and we're trying to fix it. We are getting way off track already.
We really are.
We're supposed to be here talking about the nutrition.
Oh, we'll get there. We'll get there. But if you're interested, please sign up. Or there is not even a sign up. Just show up on May 11th from 9 to noon here at Clairol in Portland, New York. Bring your laptop, bring your cell phone, and we'll get you started looking at some data on your own farm. Okay, now we can transition into Terry's second.
Number 2.
Yes. We're talking about nutrition and how we got there, and this
right.
is all.
So this is the top 10 nutrition studies. Jen and I said we're going to do a follow-up on the top 10 like pruning, mechanization, crop load management projects, but this is just new nutrition work. And last time we talked about the little dig. So we had young 3-year-old vines that we dug out, I think it was 6 or 9 times throughout the season. And we talked about that, where all the nutrients were being redistributed in the spring, and then which helped us build more new shoots and new roots to take up nutrients and water and do photosynthesis. And then so assimilation of water and nutrients, and then partitioning of water and nutrients in either to the vegetative growth or the reproductive growth, which leads to the concept of vine balance. We talked all about that in the last podcast. And the big dig, so in a nutshell, the big dig told us all the same stuff, but with more mature vines. So these were, 30 plus year old vines in Fredonia. We dug the vines up 10 times throughout the growing season. So we went from a dormant season to dormant season. Dormant, April 3rd, bud break, 10-inch shoots, bloom, plus 15 days, plus 30 days, veraison, harvest, and then dormant again. Separated the vines into all its parts, right? Fruit, leaves, shoots, 1-year-old wood, 2-year-old wood, trunks and cordons, shank, thick roots, thin roots, and prunings, and analyzed them. Carbohydrates, nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, like all the nutrients. This was an awesome project in that the little dig was something I just did myself, just to learn. The big dig we did with mature vines, and we brought in some great researchers to add value components to the project. So Alan Laxo came in and did a lot of work on canopy development and light interception. Martin Goffinet, who did a lot of work in grapevine anatomy, did work on vascular reactivation in the throughout the growing season. Lei Lang Chang, who is a horticulturist on the Ithaca campus, did work with us on fertilizer nutrient uptake. So we used non-radioactive isotopes of nitrogen in fertilizer. So we could say, when were the vines taking up nitrogen? Where was that nitrogen going? Who else was involved with that project?
Just for the isotopes that you're talking about, because for some of our listeners out there, that's just a special kind that we use that you can actually see different from what's there. You know that it's something you added.
Yeah. So most people think of when you use like isotope labeling for, the one that always comes to mind is where you use isotope of iodine to find out if you have thyroid problems. That's like radioactive material. So like you can pick up the signal with a Geiger counter. And with nitrogen, it's a non-radioactive isotope. So it's a different there's a different form of nitrogen, and you make up fertilizer with that. And then when that fertilizer gets taken up, you can analyze it and you can say how much of the nitrogen in this particular tissue comes from that fertilizer versus how much of the nitrogen has to come from some other source, like the decomposition of organic matter being taken up in the roots. Right. So we can look at stuff like fertilizer efficiency and when it's being taken up and fun stuff like that. So,
which is important when we talk about our recommends and when we tell you you should apply them. Like, this is all based in this research.
Yes. Yeah.
Trying to circle it back so people are making the connections between this is what you guys did and found out, and then this is how we apply it.
Right. So think of it this way, like, so here's my spiel about fertilizers. So, okay, you go to the doctor.
Be punchy.
Yeah, no, be punchy. Say you go to the doctor, right? And you're like, hey, I'm not feeling so good. Like, I'm feeling kind of logy and I'm tired all the time. And what's the doctor do? The doctor takes a blood test and measures all these things that are in your blood to try to determine or diagnose like why you may not be feeling very well. I mean, that's the same thing when we're talking about taking tissue samples in grapevines. So like whether you're taking petioles or leaves that bloom or veraison, it's like, a doctor will say, here, you need to fast for 24 hours so we can get a measurement, a true measurement of what's going on in your blood so we can diagnose what's going on. So maybe that doctor says, oh, your blood test came back and it looks like you're low in iron. And he's going to do two things. He's going to say, here is, go take some iron vitamins, or might even give you a prescription for some supplemental vitamin material that's going to give you iron. But then he's also going to say, hey, you need to increase the amount of iron that's in your diet. Eat some red meat, eat some, spinach, something that's higher in iron. Yeah, so that I'm going to give you a vitamin to fix the immediate problem, but in the long term, you need to fix your lifestyle, the way you're eating, so you can get that. I mean, this is really very similar. In this case, in the Big Dig, we are digging up the vine and we're separating into its parts and analyzing it to say, hey, what does the vine need? And then, so again, I always talk about its nutrient supply, nutrient uptake through the root system, and then nutrient demand. This is all about nutrient demand. It's about identifying what the vines need. And then we need to match, what is the diet for that vine? What is the soil supplying? And do we need to supplement that with a vitamin? But I think everyone needs to understand, this is a very important point, like, it's all about your diet. It's about what you're eating on a day-to-day basis, not the
vitamins you're taking, or the fertilizer you're adding.
Nobody on this call, I hope, is going to try to live their entire life by eating vitamins alone, right? Take 10 vitamins a day, and don't eat anything. It's not gonna work, right?
Not gonna work. I love that analogy. It really brings it down to something people can grasp and understand instead of
right. So the supply of nutrients and water from the soil, and what you do as a manager to improve the availability of what's already there is your diet. And then there are times of the year or portions of your vineyard where you're like, oh, shoot, I'm not getting enough. It's almost like an emergency situation. I need to add some vitamins. I need to add some fertilizer. The fertilizer is very supplemental to what's going on it from your diet on a day-to-day basis in the vineyard. So that's kind of my pitch about fertilizer. People are like, just tell me how much nitrogen to apply. I'm like, well, it's really not that simple. Like, right. You need to know a lot more about your vineyard in terms of soil organic matter and soil health, and how are the microorganisms releasing that nitrogen, and is your soil waterlogged? Are your roots not growing where the nitrogen is? All those things come together to then say, okay, yep, you need to supplement with some nitrogen, and this is how much you should supplement with. So there's my spiel about.
Love that spiel. Thank you.
And so the big dig now is all about what are the numbers and where are the nutrients in the vines and how much do the vines need. So again, I'm not going to really go nutso on this graph. This is the dry mass of like below ground and above ground parts. And then the blue line is roots. The green line is shoots and leaves. And the purple line is fruit. And it just reiterates the same stuff that we learned in the little dig, right? You have your roots are your major storage organ for carbohydrates. So starch being stored in the roots gets remobilized to grow new stuff in the spring. And so there's your gas tank, and your gas tank from bud break to bloom. It's using that gas tank to first grow new roots, which is the blue line, and that's going to get you more nutrients and more water. Then it puts its energy into growing new shoots, which is going to intercept sunlight, and you're going to get carbon through carbon fixation. So you're the one taking the plant phys course right now.
Yes.
And then it's going to use new roots and new shoots to build a crop, and it kind of does that in order throughout the season. And people have been studying grapevines for hundreds of thousands of years, it seems like. Right. So this should not be anything new. But what kind of is new is like, whoa.
Holy Christmas. And I just want to interrupt just for a quick second. For those of you who are listening to this as a podcast, there's also the ability to watch it as a YouTube video. So just search Between the Vines or Terry Bates, and you'll be able to see all these graphs if it's not making sense to you just the way we're talking. Yeah. Although you do a very great job at explaining what you're looking at.
Sorry, yeah, no, I'm a very visual learner, so a lot of my stuff is graphs. So yeah, you don't need to know everything that goes on in all these charts, but just to reiterate the point, we dug up these vines 10 times throughout the season, separated all those parts, and did all this analysis. So it's like we know what the pattern of magnesium, say, is in the vines, and iron and sodium, and and for the most part, like if you're looking at it from a 30,000 foot view, a lot of it's very similar, right? Your storage organs, your perennial wood, especially below ground perennial wood, has everything stored in it, and it uses it from bud break to bloom, and it uses it to build new roots and new shoots. I mean, that's what it's there for. And then you get on the latter half of the season, you're getting its assimilation and partitioning that's going into the fruit and the wood for next season. So, okay, let's look at nitrogen, because everyone talks about nitrogen, and the vines need more nitrogen than any other nutrient. Let's see, what did I want to say about it? Because, again, what I've already said is this redistribution, and then which transitions into assimilation and partitioning is another theme that goes with nitrogen. So the chart, yes.
I'm sorry. I just want to. So you're saying that in the beginning, the redistribution is using it from the root system, pushing it up through. And as that depletes, the assimilation is how the roots then go out and get it from the soil.
Correct. And that's, and it happens at a time of the year. So say by the time we hit bloom in mid-June, the soil is now warm. The microorganisms are doing their thing. They're releasing more nitrogen from the mineralization of organic matter in the soil. And at the same time, you're getting new fleshy white roots out that can pick up that nitrogen and put it into new growth. So the chart on the left is the total amount of nitrogen in the plant in its different parts throughout the growing season. And the chart on the right is the nitrogen, the NFF is nitrogen from fertilizer. So you'll see that the vine isn't really picking up nitrogen, not that much, until bloom.
That is
Yeah.
2
So
inches.
yeah.
Yeah,
2,
2
3,
inches.
4, 5. Yeah, bloom. So D5 is the bloom time point. So now we're finally starting to get some uptake of nitrogen by bloom.
But it's negligible before that. So it definitely tells you the roots were given the plant its nitrogen at that time.
Yeah, and we put this fertilizer on. I got to go back and look to see it exactly when it was. But say it was around D2. I mean, the fertilizer went down. So, it sits there, it gets leached, it gets tied up in organic matter because the vine's really not taking it up until, the time period between, this 10-inch shoot growth and bloom. Okay. So that's why we've pushed our recommendation for applying nitrogen fertilizer closer to that bloom period. You're like, why don't you just wait and put your nitrogen fertilizer down when the vines are just about ready to take it up, or just a little bit before. So, and again, sometimes that has to do with the type of fertilizer you're putting down. So if you're putting down ammonium nitrate, it's a salt. As soon as it gets into the soil moisture profile, or whatever, as soon as it dissolves, it's a salt. As soon as it dissolves, that nitrate is available, ready to be taken up. If you're putting down urea, so it's more of it needs to be converted by microorganisms. Urea goes nitrate, and before it can be taken up. So it takes a little time, but it doesn't take months. It takes like a few days for that to happen. And it depends on the soil conditions. If it's warm and you have enough soil moisture, it's going to happen a lot faster than, if it's cold and the microorganisms are just sitting there, not doing very much. The other thing I thought was interesting about this chart, so both whether you're looking at total nitrogen or the nitrogen coming from fertilizer, is if you look at the last 2 times we dug up the vine, so at harvest and then the dormant vines after that, most of the nitrogen, whether it's total nitrogen or nitrogen from fertilizer, right, about half of all of the nitrogen in the vine is either in the fruit or in the leaves and shoots. And we always say that post-harvest, the leaves senesce and remobilize nitrogen back into the perennial structures of the vine. And this data does not really support that, at least not to a large extent. We've done some work with Lei Lang Chang on spraying nitrogen on leaves late in the season, and we can remobilize some of that nitrogen into the cane tissue. But what this data is showing is that, this much nitrogen is in the fruit, and we harvest the fruit and take that away. And then another good chunk is in the leaves, and the leaves fall off. And there's not a lot getting remobilized back into the perennial structures. In our case, the leaves senesce, fall on the ground, and it probably gets back into the soil cycle. And that nitrogen will be available for next year. Marcus Keller in Washington State is actually, because in some of their Washington State vineyards, there's a lot of wind. They're putting nets around the vines, and when the leaves fall off, they're collecting those leaves and analyzing the nitrogen and other nutrients that are in those leaves just to see, where is it going? And in our case, I think most of our leaves get trapped at least at some part of your vineyard and can get,
I have a question, and because I don't see it on these graphs that we're looking at, but your isotopes there from fertilizer. Oh, I guess that's
that's the NFF.
Yeah.
So there's some math that goes on in there. So this is what Lei Lang did. You analyze it, and then you have to relate the amount of nitrogen coming from that fertilizer, and you make an estimate of what how much came from total amount of fertilizer. There's a little math that goes on there. That's all I'm saying. So the bottom graph shows the same thing as the upper two, just instead of bar charts, it's a line graph, either total nitrogen in the vine or nitrogen from fertilizer. So again, the nitrogen that came from fertilizer is like nothing
Right, that's what
compared.
I wanted to get at. And I
It's
know
like,
that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, it's the same what we were just talking about. It is, if I have to go from 30 pounds per acre of nitrogen at my lowest point to 65, so it's got to come up with 35 pounds of nitrogen per acre. And if I'm getting like 5 from fertilizer, then that's 30 pounds per acre of nitrogen that has to come from something other than fertilizer, right? That's your diet. That's your steak
Right.
and potatoes that are giving up nitrogen that the vines can take up. And then during this rapid point of vine growth, and it's reflected here in the amount of nitrogen being up and taken up from, say, bloom to veraison, when you're, yeah, right, you're growing your canopy, you're growing roots, you're growing fruit, you're taking up a lot of nitrogen. If what is being supplied by your diet in the soil can't do it fast enough, then you need to supplement with like a vitamin, which would be
Right.
fertilizer.
Fertilizer.
And that so to me that makes sense. And it's,
So you were really boosting my momentum for soil health and building soil health. So thank you. I appreciate it.
yes, like in theory, you could build soil health to the point where you would not need any vitamins. You would not need any fertilizer. It's a kind of a double-edged sword. The better your soil health gets, probably the larger your vine size gets. Your vine capacity goes up, so the rate at which shoots grow gets faster and greater, so the demand gets greater. So you're still kind of in this cycle, like when the vine's growing really, really fast and setting a really big crop, it might, what you're getting from soil health might not be fast enough to keep up with
And
the
then
vine, and you need
vitamin.
fertilizer, right? In a natural system, you have a grapevine that's growing in the woods up a tree, and the crop load is probably not very high, right? You got a lot of leaves and not a lot of fruit, and so you don't need fertilizer. But in our we're about as far from natural as you can get, right? We're taking grapevines out of their natural environment, growing them on a trellis in a fairly intensively managed system. So we're asking the vines to do more than what they're naturally capable of doing. So we need to add the fertilizer to help keep them running as fast as they can.
We're not totally against fertilizer. We're just saying use it when you need it, when you need
Yeah,
that.
it just raises questions of how much fertilizer do you need? How much does that change with your vine health, your diet, the capacity of the vine, so how much it needs, and then like can it keep up? So you can vary your nitrogen fertilizer application based on those factors.
So build up your organic matter because that's where the nitrogen's going to come from.
Yes.
Into.
Okay, so this chart shows the amount of nutrients. So there's like the total amount of nutrients that the vines need, and then what I like to look at, how much nutrients they need on an annual cycle, right? So the vines start with something in their perennial tissue. They have a gas tank, and then we use up some of that gas tank, and then you refill the gas tank later in the season. So what is that annual cycle? What do they need? And this is on a pounds per acre basis. So, these mature, they were like 8 ton per acre vines. They're, and of moderate size, like they were 2.5 pound vines, 8 tons per acre. Anyways, nitrogen about 50 pounds, potassium about 50 pounds, calcium about 42 pounds per acre. So this is what the vines need. And I mean, that's that's why we spend so much time talking about nitrogen fertilizer. They need a lot of it, and there might be times of the year where the vine's growing so fast vegetatively, because a lot of that nitrogen is in the vegetative structure, that we need to keep up with it with fertilizer. Potassium is a very big one for Concord, and I'll show a graph here in a second about how much potassium is in the fruit. So when it comes to comparing nitrogen and potassium, nitrogen, a lot of it is tied up in the vegetative, like the leaves and the shoots, which makes a lot of sense. You need a lot of nitrogen to make chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is doing photosynthesis,
Through
It's like,
light-dependent reactions.
exactly. And potassium, a majority, like it's lopsided towards the fruit, in especially with Concord.
Okay.
So we can easily run into potassium deficiency. Calcium, we don't talk a lot about it. There tends to be in our whatever fairly good organic matter, weathered soils in the Northeast, we tend to have enough calcium for uptake into the vine. I guess I've never done fertilizer work with calcium, and it's not like, I guess it's not out of the question. I just haven't worked with it. So calcium is used when you're talking about like a nutrient deficiency in calcium. Calcium plays a major role in the structural components of cell wall material. Calcium pectate is like the cement that holds cell wall material together. And if you are deficient in calcium, you tend to have your cell walls start to fall apart. So your vine just grow like think about it playing a role in shoot growth. So you're laying down new cell wall material as that shoot grows, and if you get low on calcium, the shoot tip starts to fall apart, and then the vine grows funny, and it's very kind of obvious when you get that deficiency, and we just don't.
I think it's called lodging or something. They just fall over. If you were to doing your cover crop and you were low on calcium, they would fall over.
Yes, and right, and like we just don't typically see that symptom in Concord grapes in the Northeast. I've always questioned whether or not calcium sprays late in the season might help. That might be a great research project for us to do. They spray it in other fruit crops for fruit firmness. And sometimes I think, if our Concord fruit gets over mature and starts to fall apart, that maybe some calcium sprays would help hold it together. But I don't know that for sure. I'm just guessing because we haven't done that kind of work.
No, but we did spray calcium products last fall and again this spring. So it might be interesting to go back
you could see if you get a boost.
So the next biggest one going down your list was actually be phosphorus, but that is, if calcium is at, I'm just going to give some numbers. You said 42.48 per acre, pound per acre.
Yep.
Phosphorus is only just under 7.
Yeah, right. It doesn't. So the rest of these nutrients are a lot less, right? I mean, we talk about macronutrients and micronutrients. All nutrients, when they get the designation of an essential mineral nutrient, it means that you need that nutrient to complete the vine or the plant's life cycle, and it can't be substituted by another nutrient. So all of them are important. Like boron is really important, but you don't need very much of it. Like if you are deficient in boron, you got problems, right? So I would say all of them are equally important to complete the plant's life cycle. It's just they're needed in different amounts. So just from a practical standpoint, we tend to talk more about the ones that are needed more because your diet, your soil diet is not supplying it fast enough, and you need to. So nitrogen and potassium are the biggest ones.
And here's a plug for a soil test in order to know what your diet is, what is available in your diet. So you need to know not just what's taken up into the tissue test.
I actually have a slide about that. I know we're already starting to go getting long. So, okay. This is an important thing about soil health, right? Your nutrients that you're taking up, so your potassium, your magnesium, and your calcium are cations. And we'll talk about this in another podcast because it's one of the top 10. So those they sit on the cation exchange capacity of soils, and they desorb off of the soil, and then the roots can take them up. Nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur are what we call oxyanions. They exist as oxyanions for plant uptake. So nitrate, phosphate, and sulfate, and they mostly come from the decomposition of organic matter. So again, your diet. Mm-hmm. How much organic matter do you have? Is your soil healthy that it has active biology going on, micro and macroorganisms, to liberate those oxyanions from the decomposition of organic matter for plant uptake. And water is another big one. You may have great organic matter, but if you have waterlogged soils, you have no microorganisms. Well, you don't have the right microorganisms doing their thing to make that happen. So, and I say this because I've gotten several comments in the last couple of weeks about, I think we're low on sulfur. And it's like, you're not probably low on sulfur. Oops.
You may need to fix your drainage.
Like if you're getting nitrogen as nitrate and you need 53 pounds of it, and you have sulfur as sulfate and you need 4 pounds of it, right? You're probably getting enough sulfur from the soils that we have. And I don't think you need more. Again, it's the same situation. You probably don't need sulfur fertilizer, but maybe there are times of very rapid vine growth, shoot growth, where you're going to need some sulfur and maybe some sulfur fertilizer. But man, you need such little amount of it that it's typically not a problem.
And can it assimilate through the leaves for people who may apply sulfur, not to certain varieties?
Oh, yeah. I don't know if if you're growing vinifera and you're using sulfur sprays, I don't think that is in a form available to plants. Okay, let's move on.
I love this book.
Yes. Okay, so we do have, when it comes to recommends, we have soil standard values, bloom petiole, and veraison or late summer petiole. Again, the High Res Vineyard Nutrition Project that we're on right now is taking all this into question. Like, should you take petioles or leaves and at bloom or veraison, and what's most indicative or reflective of telling you vine nutrient status? So we're kind of looking at these numbers, but this is what we have to work with. And so far it works. Like if you follow it, you're probably in pretty good shape to begin with. Can it be made better? Absolutely. And we're trying to do the research to make those numbers better. Okay, here's the situation with potassium, especially with Concord. So Concord, we're trying to drive the yield up. And the more we drive the yield up, we're driving up the demand for potassium by the plant. By veraison, about half of all of the potassium that is in the plant is in the fruit, right? So the bigger the crop, the more potassium is going to be in the fruit. That's why what we typically see from veraison to harvest in years where we have a big crop, we can start to see potassium deficiency on the leaves.
And if it's dry, because it really needs water to move.
Yeah, so potassium is what we call a mobile element in the vine. It's also mobile in the soil. It's a mobile element in the vine. So it will take it from the leaves and shove it into the fruit if it's not getting enough. Right. So this is a great example of supply, uptake, and demand. So in dry soils, potassium doesn't move very well. So if you have a very big crop, but you have a wet year, you tend not to see the potassium deficiency in the leaves, right? Because the fruit needs a lot of potassium and it's getting it from the soil because the roots are growing, there's moisture, cation exchange capacity, that whole deal, and the potassium is going up and going into the fruit, no problem. When you have a dry year and the potassium is not moving and you have a big crop, it has nowhere else to get the potassium but from the leaves. So it sucks it out of the leaves and puts it into the fruit.
And I want to add something to that. That's a great way of explaining it. Thank you. But you're going to need those leaves to help build the storage that's going to be in the root system for your next year's first flush of growth, right? So If you have black leaves from potassium deficiency, they can no longer photosynthesize, or at least not as efficient.
So the two most common things we see when you have late season potassium deficiency in Concord is the fruit doesn't ripen it slows down the ripening or the sugar accumulation, at least from a ripening standpoint, because it's not making sugars, right? Those leaves are black. You've reduced the amount of sugar that's being made, so it can't be pumped into the fruit. So it takes forever for that stuff to get ripe. And probably more importantly, your vine size goes in the tank. Like your vine size drop. I always say this all the time. Nothing drops vine size faster than potassium deficiency, especially if it's a crop-induced potassium deficiency. You make a 3-pound vine into a 1-pound vine like that.
Maybe we should irrigate Concord. Now everybody's running for the hills.
Yeah. So, I mean, that is what, yes. I guess you have to do the economic risk assessment of that. You can irrigate to increase soil moisture, increase availability of potassium so you don't run into that problem. Or the other way that we get around that is we just, from a perennial standpoint, you pump up the vines with potassium. So maintenance doses of potash, or corrective doses when you have deficiencies, so that you get, I think, what is it, 2% in the bloom time? I think it's 2%. Like, you want to have 2% potassium in your bloom time petiole samples. And if you don't, you should get it there because that will help. If you get the vine pumped up with potassium, essentially, you might be able to weather the storm of a dry soil and a big crop. So it'll suck the potassium out and put it into the fruit, but it might not get to the point where you get black leaf if you're kind of ahead of the game.
I'm sorry, this is that one thing where, because of our production system in Concord juice, where you are going for quantity and as much as you can, this is where we do tell you to take some supplements.
Yes. Okay, so here's a table that we made up based on this big dig data, and we estimated how much potassium was being taken out by the crop at different cropping levels. So at 8 tons per acre, so this is the amount of nutrients removed, pounds per acre, in the fruit. So an 8 ton per acre crop is taking out 24 pounds per acre of potassium. And it's going to the plant, like going to the processing plant.
Right.
You have 10 tons per acre. Yeah, if you have 10 tons per acre, that moves up to 30 pounds per acre of potassium. So if you're growing, I don't know if this translates to, if you're growing Pinot Noir at 2 tons per acre, you don't need a lot of potassium. But if you're growing Concord at 9 tons per acre, you need a lot of potassium.
Right.
And that's why it's such a critical thing from a nutrient management standpoint in Concord. Make sense?
It does. And this has all been really great. I love that we're going over this step by step, and I'm really interested to hear what our audience thinks as well. So please feel free to leave comments below if you're watching it on YouTube. This is not the end. I'm just letting you know we want to hear whether this is helping you, which in my mind, I think that it is. But
okay, so you brought this up before, and I'm like, oh, good, I have a slide about it. It's about the nutrients. So this is both supply and demand now. We're kind of starting to mix our conversation together. It's what amount of nutrients, calcium, magnesium, potassium, what is in the soil that's locked up in the solid phase of the soil, which is unavailable to plants in its current form. It needs to, through weathering of that soil, the mineral particles in that soil and cation exchange, it becomes available. But the blue line is what is there in the soil but not available to plants. The orangey line is what is available to the plants. And that's what you get off of a soils test. So when you take a soil sample, you send it in for analysis, it comes back and says, oh, okay, you have whatever, X number of pounds of nitrogen available or potassium available. That's what is available to the plant. And then the green line is what we analyzed by the big dig, what got taken up into the entire vine. And the portion of that which goes into the fruit is in the purple. So this is the curveball.
that's a great visual.
Yeah, it gets better. This is the curveball. For those of scientists that are out there, this is a log scale. So it's 1, 10, 100, right? It's not linear. It's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? It's these bars. So let me put it on a linear scale for you.
Oh my goodness.
So what is there in the soil, in a soil reserve, right? Like it's your diet that you haven't yet eaten. Right?
Waiting for you.
It is waiting for you. So when it takes the action of weathering of microorganisms in your soil to make it in a form that's unavailable to plants to a form that's available to plants. And what you need. So the reservoir that's there is huge. What you actually need to make it available is like so small.
Even
You
though it's huge to the plant, it's so small to what's available on the buffet.
Right. So this is the comment that I get sometimes is about I'm depleting my soil of X, Y, or Z, and you're like, you're not really. It might be in a form that's unavailable to the plant, and it needs weathering and it needs action of microorganisms to actually make it available. But just to say, oh, I've depleted my soil of everything, it's like that's not true.
Right.
We have a lot of hunters out there, and I think this will resonate with hunters. If you put a mineral rock out in your whatever where you go deer hunting, and the deer comes up and it licks the block, it tastes salty. That's why the deer like it. And the deer comes back the next day and it licks the rock again. It's still salty. Like, you're not depleting the reservoir of minerals that are. It's that whatever the deer's saliva is doing cation exchange, right? It's taking the nutrients or the salt particles that are exchangeable on the surface of that rock, and they're tasting it, and then they come back the next day, and it's what's locked up in the mineral form of that rock, essentially unavailable. Then you get new ions on the surface, so it's salty again, and it just keeps doing that. It's like it comes back in the year and it licks the rock. The rock's still there; it's still salty. It's the same thing with our soils, right? There's potassium in the clay particles of our soil. It's in the lattice of the clay particles. And as those clay particles break down and weather and split, right, those potassium ions become available as part of the cation exchange. So it then becomes available to the plant. And like next year, the reservoir that's there is so huge. That blue bar is so big. It's there. It takes time for it to break down and become available to the plant.
I can hear some of our growers saying, so we don't have to put potassium on anymore then, because there's enough of it in the soil.
No, okay, that's a subject for another podcast on cation exchange and base saturation, and it's about the balance of calcium, magnesium, and potassium on the cation exchange sites. But to say that it's like the potassium that's in the lattice of the clay particles has somehow been depleted is not correct.
Got it.
It just needs to.
You just need to figure out how to weather it so it's available for the plant.
So that it's there, yes.
Oh, that's cool. Well, you guys have a lot of podcasts to look forward to.
This is my last slide. So and it's just reiterating what I've already said, right? Stuff to make nutrients available in your diet, right? From that's being liberated by the soil and organic matter is, I think, from a management standpoint, what we need to be spending 80% of our time, effort, and money on, right? Soil pH amendments, putting down, like nobody puts down, well, not nobody. It used to be a common practice for us to put manure in vineyards, and that's gone to the wayside. So like stuff like that, building organic matter through cover cropping, water management, drainage when there's too much water, or I should say irrigation, or some kind of floor management that conserves soil moisture. That sometimes can be your best fertilizer. We should be spending most of our time doing that. Like, all your effort should be in your diet, right? Making your diet healthy. And then the plants can do their thing. And then when you need that extra boost of vitamins, right? That's your fertilizer that you're putting down at particular times of the year to keep up with the intensive management of the grapevines that we have.
And just to reiterate when that important time of the year is, we always recommend that it's 2 weeks before bloom up to 4 weeks after. During that rapid shoot growth is when it switches over from its reserves to assimilation or pulling it out of the soil.
Yes.
That's when you want it there to have it available.
Right. Yeah. What's on the left is we're going back to our doctor analysis. That this is your healthy lifestyle. And then, okay, things aren't going so great. the good thing is we have soil and tissue values to go against. So things aren't going so great, or I see that there's weak growth in this part of the vineyard, or I'm seeing some nutrient deficiency in my leaves. I can sample that tissue, I can have it analyzed, and then we can prescribe the right vitamin that's going to solve your problem in the short term, and then give you a recommendation on maybe you should be doing X, Y, or Z in terms of soil management to solve your problem long term. It's very similar to the whole doctor thing. Oh, what medicine can I give you right now to fix your problem? But hey, buddy, let's change your lifestyle a little bit to make sure that doesn't happen again.
I think that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
All right, that's your last slide.
The doctor says I should probably eat less donuts.
No, it's coffee pot season.
Eat more grapes and apples. Yeah, okay. I think that was my last slide for now. And next time we'll talk about number 3, which I think is the West Tier experiment. Top 10, number 3.
I always hear questions about whatever happened with the West Tier. What's ever happening with the West Tier?
Oh my gosh.
So I can't wait. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you, listeners, for hanging in there with us, and I hope that you found this useful. Please leave comments below. We are definitely doing this series with Dr. Terry Bates, but if there are other things that crop up and you need more information on it, please put those comments below or send me an email that you need more information, and we can address them in crop updates or newsletters, or maybe bring on another special guest who may have some information for you. But in the meantime, thank you, Dr. Terry Bates,
for
joining us and for all of your knowledge, and we'll see you all next week.